2016, but my journey began much sooner than that. My father was an aircraft mechanic for American Airlines, so he was one who really led me into the field of aviation. And I started in 2001 with my professional aviation degree at Louisiana Tech University. And after I graduated with that 4-year degree, like Heather said, I was a flight instructor for about 1.5 years in Dallas, Texas, and then also just outside of Memphis, and then gained a commercial pilot position with SkyWest Airlines in 2007. I was a first officer for about 4 years, and then a captain for 2 years before I was able to gain a job with Delta in 2016, flying a 717. And now I am finally doing international flying a 757, 767 to Asia, Hawaii, Europe, obviously all pre-COVID. But it's been quite a long journey, but I'm happy to be where I am now. And I'd say my main roles and responsibilities, of course, to get everyone safely and efficiently across this great world, and to support my captain, even though both of us fly either every leg or every other leg. He or she is the ultimate decision, but I am the backup for all of the important decisions to be made on each and every flight. And that's about it. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Great. Vanessa, we'll do Vanessa and Diane.
So, okay, great. I was just so mesmerized listening to the Lauren's paths. Really great. My name is Vanessa Aponte Williams, and I am the Lunar Lander Mission Ops Lead, and I work for Lockheed Martin Space. And so my day-to-day, I guess, responsibilities right now are to develop training and understanding of what that mission to the moon, that's going to take the first woman to the moon, is going to look like. So my team and I understand from beginning to end everything that the vehicle needs to do, the training that the astronauts have to undergo. We prepare materials, mock-ups, so that the astronauts can train. And it's probably one of the most exciting roles that I've had. I grew up in Puerto Rico, and never imagined that I would be in aerospace, much less any science. And it's been a nonlinear journey for me. I started as a chemical engineer, have 2 degrees in chemical engineering, and then ended up doing my Ph.D. at CU Boulder. That's why I was like, go Buffs, Johnny. And had the opportunity to work at NASA Dryden, where a lot of cool flying has been done since the 1950s. That's where Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier for the first time. So I had the great pleasure to work in the Mojave Desert for a few years, and then worked at Johnson Space Center, where the astronaut training happens. And so my career again has been, it has taken some twists and turns, and hope to fly in space one day, whether commercially or at NASA. So pretty, that's my goal, at least to send people to the moon and Mars if I don't get to fly. Diane.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me on. My name's Diane Simard, and I don't have a traditional background in aerospace. I'm sorry to disappoint everyone. I actually have a journalism degree. I'm a writer and focus on communications and media relations first and foremost. But I, over the years, over my career, have found myself in several situations where I was part of a small business, and a company that I had with my now ex-husband. We had a successful exit about 18 years ago. And so we parted ways because we were in business together and could hardly stand each other by the time that experience was over. So one of the things I did was actually start to invest in other people's ideas. And so I invested in Buy Aerospace right before the last recession, unfortunately. And I really liked what our CEO and founder, George Bai, was doing in terms of bringing clean energy solutions to aviation. It's a great market. It's a great opportunity. And so fast forward to where we're at today, and we're actually certifying a 2-seat all-electric airplane called the E-Flyer 2. And we're targeting the, and Lauren will appreciate this, the pilot training market because of the commercial pilot shortage and just how efficient in so many ways an electric airplane is. Again, similar efficiencies with electric cars and ground transportation. And so that's our focus certainly right now. So great because we're kind of having our moment. And so we've been test flying a prototype airplane for a couple of years. And we've got concepts for more sizable, larger aircraft that we're going to be developing as well. So as I mentioned, my background really is more on the communications side. So I wear multiple hats here. I'm actually on the board of directors, as Heather mentioned, and then also coordinate our media relations and then our investor relations, which is we're a privately held company. And so we're funded by the equity or the capital that we raise. And so I help to manage that as well. And it's just one of those great jobs where it has continued to evolve and the momentum is growing. And aerospace is such a fascinating career field. Quite honestly, I look forward to diving in with the other panelists on why this is such a great field. So anyway, again, thank you for inviting me on.
And then I guess that leaves me. So first off, thank you to Kristen and Heather and all of the Colorado Women's Chamber team. Really excited to be part of this amazing group of women here today talking about aerospace. As Heather said, my name is Rachel Marion, and I'm the Senior Director of Government Affairs for Denver International Airport. And a little bit about my background, I am a licensed attorney, go Buffs, graduate of CU Law School. And I think Chantal and I have this in common. About midway through law school, I don't know when it occurred to her, but at a certain point, I realized I found policy work far more intellectually challenging and personally rewarding than traditional legal work. And so after law school, worked in a variety of capacities, both in public and private sector on different policy work. And about 4 years ago, came out to the airport. Didn't have really any experience in aviation, but did have experience in a number of other areas. And I like to say that my superpower is finding creative solutions to complex problems. And airports are certainly no stranger to complex problems. So I lead a team of actually all women at this time that deal with all federal, state, regional, and local policy for the airport. So at the federal level, that's working with members of Congress. It's dealing with an alphabet soup of federal regulatory agencies like the FAA, TSA. And then on the other end, at the local level, Denver International Airport is an agency of the city and county of Denver. And so ultimately, we report up to the mayor, and all of our contracts from concessions to airline agreements to construction, maintenance, all of that goes through Denver City Council and mayoral approval process. So my team works with external and internal stakeholders from our real estate team, our environment and sustainability team, our infrastructure and maintenance, airline affairs, on all the different policies that impact operations at Denver International Airport.
That's great. Thank you, everybody. Jade asked a really great question that just goes along as we're learning about you. So I'm going to throw this one in here. You know, what was the spark as a young person that led you to continue on a STEM path? So Rachel, we'll start with you, and then we'll go backwards and we'll wrap up with you, Lauren.
So oddly enough, I was not on a STEM path whatsoever. I graduated college without taking a single math or science class in all of my college experience, which is not something to brag about, but I definitely trended towards the arts, not the sciences. And so I say that to say that I think aviation and aerospace are places that everybody thinks of as traditional STEM environments, but I think you have at least two of us, if not three of us, that didn't go that path and still have found really incredible careers in the aviation and aerospace industry. So at Denver International Airport, there are numerous opportunities that for careers in aviation that have nothing to do with a traditional STEM trajectory.
Thanks, Rachel. I have a similar background, as I mentioned, more of a liberal arts background, but I have to say, having met our CEO and founder, George Bai, I just became so enthralled and impressed with this industry, aerospace and aviation. I thoroughly enjoy it for multiple reasons, one of which is the aspect of how highly educated you are to be in this industry, but also the passion that exists for the love of flight, the love of aviation, the love of space. I just have never experienced anything like that before in my life. And to be able to glean as an employer, to hold on to that, to glean, it's just, there's just a level of passion that's just so different than any other industry I've worked in.
Double muted there. I guess for me, I did not grow up with any scientists or engineers near me. I grew up chasing chicken at my grandma's house in the Caribbean. And so I wasn't surrounded by any examples of that. However, there are two things, I'd say two sparks for me. And one of them was the amazement that I felt whenever I would go out at night to the balcony of my house and look up at the stars and felt like I belong up there. I didn't understand why I had that fascination, but all I knew is that I found just, that's what my dreams look like. My dreams look like just looking at like the night sky. And it wasn't until 11th grade when a wonderful chemistry teacher just ignited that passion for science and showed me that I actually belonged in that field, because there's something to be said about feeling like you belong somewhere, or that you're allowed somewhere. And it wasn't until then that I realized that I actually had a chance in a place in sciences. So that those two things really ignited the path, and in how it unfolded later, just a little more convoluted, but really those two things were there at the beginning.
Okay, and that leaves me last but not least. I would say that I'm not particularly gifted in the STEM area. There were classes, of course, for math and for science, but I would not say that I particularly excelled at them. However, I will echo what Diane said, where it is innate passion that is within you. And my father was an aircraft mechanic for American Airlines. So I flew with my family to different museums, the Naval Academy in Florida, or the Flight Museum that's in Washington, seeing those from a young age, or doing fly-ins with my father. I just knew that's where I wanted to be from a very, very young age. And so really following that path, aviation, as some of you well know, is not a very well paid profession at the beginning. And to really go through and jump through all the hoops, you have to have it deep within inside of you. So it is a STEM path, but more or less flying aviation in its own right has to come from a true love and a true joy.
I love that. I mean, you've all mentioned it's this, whether you didn't have that, traditional STEM path, or you didn't have someone, who looked like you to show you that path, or you went a completely non-traditional way to where you are now. I love that. And I love, highlighting that for people. And the common theme is this passion that you all have, for this industry, and that desire and that interest, which is, why you are where you are today. So I love that. It's such a great reminder for everybody listening. It's no secret that, aerospace and aviation is, very male dominated. I know at the airport, Rachel, you had mentioned that, your team is, made up of women. You also have, your executive leadership has quite a few women, and your CEO is a female, which is super amazing. But I would love for each of you to share, your experiences or one challenge that you faced, and how did you overcome that? Vanessa, let's start with you, and then, we can have the rest of the panelists chime in as well.
I would say I guess the first one that comes to mind is just not looking like a stereotypical person in the industry. It's a very still male-led industry. It has changed over time in the 20 plus years that I've been in the industry. It looks very different from the first time that I was at NASA Dryden in the middle of the Mojave Desert, and I was one of 5 females or 5 women at NASA. Everybody knew your name. That was interesting, at the same time weird that everybody knew your name, people that you had never met. So one of the things that came at first for me is it's trying to use my voice and have my voice be taken seriously, because I didn't look like a stereotypical aerospace engineer. And at first, I just did what probably most of you at some point or another had to do, is try to blend in, which it only helps you think that you blend in. It doesn't really don't blend in. Dressing more seriously, suits, etc. Something that would make me look more less than a female. And coming from the Caribbean, I mean, color. It's always we're very proud to be colorful and outgoing, and so at some point, as I grew more comfortable in my skin, I had some successes under my belt, I felt more confident. I decided that it was really exhausting to try to blend in and be something that I was not. And it was liberating to just show up as you are. And I have found out that people embrace you and learn who you are much better when you're yourself, because you feel more like you are more energized to do what it is that you're here to do. And so that's how I overcame it, just embracing who I am, and hoping that others do. And if they didn't, then we just also are professionals, and we have to learn to work with each other, even if we don't understand each other perfectly.
I will agree. I'll echo what Vanessa was just talking about, that being a completely male dominated industry, Delta has 13,000 pilots, and we barely make up under 10%, I'd say 700. And though the pilot group is slowly but surely transitioning, we are by and large the minority. And where she was talking about blending in, just wanting to fly under the radar, if you will, that was my intention when I first got a job with the airlines. But I've slowly learned as well that no matter what, people are exiting the flight deck, oh, I've never flown with a female. You are omnipresently there as a woman in aviation. And so the way to overcome that is just to, I think, show up as a consummate professional and to do the job better than the males do it. I mean, honestly, my parents had a very good friend that I grew up with who was a pilot for Delta. And he gave me a recommendation, and he retired, and I flew with a friend of his. And unbeknownst to me, Ken White told Mark Outful, who I grew up with, that I was a good stick and rudder, meaning a good pilot. And Mark texted me saying, I was surprisingly happy that you're a good pilot. And for me, if you're surprisingly happy, that sounds great, but that shouldn't be the way that it is. And so it's me showing up every day to prove that I didn't just get hired on affirmative action or my looks or my personality or people that I know, but because I know what I am doing. And again, I'm a consummate professional.
I'll jump in and just say that, again, with my background and interest in growing businesses, quite honestly, boy, I didn't know anything about aerospace or aviation or space. And so because of being trained as a journalist, I have this inquisitive nature and I'm always asking questions. And again, I credit this industry because there's such a great willingness to share knowledge. And of course, there's a pilot story for everything. Sorry, Lauren. There's just such amazing stories to be told and to learn about. But even we're headquartered here at Centennial Airport, south of Denver. And so there's a restaurant called The Perfect Landing. And I've learned much about what I know about small general aviation aircraft just by sitting out and seeing all the planes on the ramp and asking, what does that airplane do? What's the name of that airplane? And to just ask questions in a non-threatening yet inquisitive way. And then the other piece of advice I often give is kind of on that same theme. People generally do like to talk about themselves in terms of their career experiences and share their experiences and to just ask a lot of questions about, well, here's a situation, what would you do? Ask their advice. And that has so many times bailed me out of an uncomfortable situation. Just learning really how to communicate in a different way without even disclosing that, you know, you're in over your head. But just asking these innocent questions has been a great tool for me to get out of a lot of uncomfortable, challenging situations.
I agree with everything the other three women on this panel have said. And I would add two things. I do feel very lucky to be a part of an airport with a leadership team that, as you mentioned, Heather, has a lot of strong, talented, capable women on it. You know, in Colorado, two of our major airports, Denver International Airport and Grand Junction, both have executive directors that are women, which is great. I will also say that, to echo a little bit of what Diane said, I have been amazed by the passion, the desire for inclusivity among everybody at Denver International Airport. So yes, it's very male dominated. It's very white dominated, but I have felt very supported by the men on the Denver International Airport team. And I think that's also something that's important. I have been, you know, you talk about challenges, and I have been in meetings where maybe somebody's not taking my opinion seriously or valuing me as a member of the team. And I have been truly blessed to have male members of senior leadership at the airport, on our legal team, stop a middle of a 20-person meeting and say, you know, Rachel deserves to be heard. She's here for a reason. She was hired for a reason. And having those kind of advocates stick up for you in the moment, I think can't be, the value of that cannot be undersold. The value of having, especially people in positions of power, whether that's by title or perceived power in a male dominated industry, stick up for you in a moment and have your back has been made the transition into this male dominated industry pretty seamless.
I love that. And that's a great segue into my next question, which is, you know, who has supported you along the way? So, you know, whether personally, professionally, or both, you know, especially as you know, got into this industry. So whether that was a while ago or whether that was, you know, more recent, you know, who has supported you along the way? Diane, let's start with you.
Thank you. I am so honored to share information about just a dear, dear friend of mine, and I consider her one of my most important mentors. First of all, I have had many mentors along the way, and I do try to give back and mentor as many young professional women especially because they've been so important for me. But her name is Gretchen John, Jahn, and Gretchen is actually was trained as a mathematician, but she has a love of aviation. She's a pilot herself, and she has run several general aviation manufacturing companies over the span of her career. And she has been a strategic advisor for Aerospace, and which is how I've gotten to know her. And I just continue to turn to her now that she's pretty much retired, to just ask her for guidance in my career path, because again, there are many advantages, I believe, because a lot like this, even this opportunity to be on this panel, because you're different, you're in a non-traditional career field, industry, if you will, in this case being aerospace, and that does bring you different opportunities. And so I appreciate that very much. And so I often look to my mentor Gretchen to just say, hey, if I do this, if I focus more on this, what's your thought on that? And she's been there, and she's just done so much, and she's just such a wonderful person who gives back and supports other women pilots. She's a part of the 99s organization. And I really want to follow in her footsteps. And so she has been my biggest supporter in this particular industry. And I'm just so grateful that she's my mentor.
That's great. Rachel, what about you? I know you mentioned some great, you've had some really great male allies. Anyone in particular, or any other one you want to, highlight?
Sure. So I would highlight one. When I first started at the airport, the head of our legal department at the time was really incredible at, to Diane's point, you get thrown into the aviation world, and there is a lot of terminology. There is a lot of highly technical information legally, from an engineering standpoint, from an environmental standpoint. And he really did an incredible job at, no question is a stupid question. Anytime I would come by his office, he would give me reading material, send me home with stuff to read. And he's still somebody, he's since left the airport, but he's still somebody to this day that any question that I have, I'll shoot him a text. And he has been incredibly supportive at allowing me to get up to speed, and never questioning, why is she here if she knows nothing about aviation. He's really just said, hey, let's get you to the point where you can become an expert in these things, and I'm happy to help support you along that journey. So I would say, and his name's Dan, has been a huge support for me in this space.
Vanessa, then Lauren.
Very similar to the others. I've had both male or I would say men and women allies that have invested in me across time. The first one hired me into the company. His name was Gary Barbosa, and interesting enough, he immediately found one of the persons that became my champion rather than just a mentor. Her name's Kathy Toby, and she was the vice president and general manager for special programs at Lockheed Martin Space. And she really not only coached me in many aspects that I needed to, it's skill sets that I needed to develop in, but she opened doors to areas that I would never had ventured on my own. It would be as simple as, you need to experience the classified world. I'm gonna get you I'm gonna get you a security clearance, and you're gonna work in this. And I had never had anyone talk to me like that. So you need to do this. And it turned out to be a mind-blowing experience, really impressive. And then through time, I've had other flavors of allies, like Chief Engineer Steve Jolly, who is our commercial civil space chief engineer, also a fantastic ally, and opened the door to other opportunities. So as much as this is a male-dominated field, my experience has been more positive than not. And it's just, I have felt pretty comfortable through time and not even realizing that I'm the only woman in the room. It's a meeting with hundreds of engineers, and there's only a handful of us, sometimes the only one, and I thrive now in that environment. I feel that there is power in commanding a room that it's full of hard customers like that can be. You are, and I see everyone shaking their heads about being hard customers. It just gives you that little bit of pride, because it's taken hundreds of years and in hundreds of women, thousands of women, to for us to be in this position now. So yeah, so I've had positive experience with both women and men allies in the industry.
Well, I hate to be traditional and say my parents, but I would say is from the beginning were probably my biggest support, pushing me to fully actualize my dream. But there have been many supports all along the way. And one of them being Tom Duda, who got me the job at Delta Airlines. And it was wonderful working with him, because I wanted to do interview preparation before I went for my final interview, and he was fully invested in me and believed in me. He said, you don't even need to do interview prep. You'll be completely ready. So, but I think the little supports along the way, you have to make sure that you're capitalizing on them, because people are willing to open doors and to connect you with the right people, but you have to also seize those opportunities. And I mean, the most grief that I get by and large is from the traveling public. It's not my peers. It's not the other pilots that I work with. It's old hat for them to see females flying with them, but the traveling public more or less is where I get the most pushback. So those that are in the industry have been completely supportive, but making sure that any olive branch that's been extended, that you take it and you run with it. So that's what I would have to say.
This is great. I want to, I have a loaded question for all of you. I want an industry question. How have you seen the industry change? And I know you're all in different aspects of, of this, but within your area of expertise, how have you seen the industry change since you got involved? How have they innovated? How have they been more welcoming to, bringing more women, into the industry and so forth? So again, like I said, I know this is a totally loaded question, and I know we only have enough time to, really lightly touch on it for each of you, but whoever wants to kick off with that, please go ahead.
I'll start. I'll say something brief, and I want to hear what the others have to say. But it really has changed quite a bit. Like I mentioned before, having a women CEO, Marion Hauser, in our corporation, I would say drastically changed everything, because she took a holistic look at what the aerospace industry looked like and started focusing on the customer and looking at the reasons why certain aerospace companies were not performing as well, not having the population be as engaged, and not having as many women leaders. And the second she transformed the values, she stated the values up front and center, started having more leadership development programs that were made available specifically to women. And when before there was very rarely any women in those programs, did change the face of Lockheed Martin specifically. And also, it just talking out loud about those things, she nailed it. She was so transparent. She pointed out we're not there yet. Yes, we're very embracing, but added that to absolutely all of the language that in the things that we did and the training and the everyday meetings in her broadcast, and it just became gospel, and it just allowed a lot of us to just stand up straight and hold our heads high and be able to be braver, because we knew that all the way to the top, our leadership was supporting us and looked like us, right? It was the first time that I had been under a women CEO and all, and so it really did change at least the way that we did business. We started connecting better with other customers that before did not want to do business with us because of that je ne sais quoi that a woman, a leader, a female leader brings to the table.
One way that I've seen it change just in the past year, I think across the country, across the world, there has been an increased conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that, it started around race in America and has, there are pieces of it for the LGBTQ community. And I think all of those conversations have been tremendously beneficial to women as well. So I would say at Denver International Airport, as we start talking about, what are our unconscious biases when we show up to a situation, and even if the conversation is based on unconscious bias as it pertains to race, I think it has opened up conversations about what are our unconscious biases as it pertain to women, as it pertain to people who are a different age than we are, as it pertains to somebody who dresses differently or who has a leadership style that is different from what we're used to. And I think those conversations at Denver International Airport specifically have been, I think, are really, really great for everyone in the industry, but have had an ancillary benefit specific to creating a more inclusive work environment for women.
Well, I'll switch it up just a little bit and focus more on the general aviation industry from a almost a cultural perspective, really. So it's always a ton of fun to be the new kid on the block trying to introduce a new technology, and which is exactly what we've done here, introducing electric aviation and the possibility of electric airplanes. And again, there have been electric airplanes flying for some time. Aerospace's approach, though, is really from a commercial perspective. We want to sell a lot of airplanes, of course, and so we're targeting specific markets. So we're combining the business with the technology. And so when I got involved with the company in 2008, I mentioned it was right before the last recession, people were literally laughing at us. I mean, they just thought we were out of our minds, and that there was no way that batteries were going to have enough energy density to be able to support and provide enough energy to fly an airplane. And so we literally in some of our presentations just got laughed at and shut down, and we just stopped our presentation because, and honestly, that was more motivation for us to continue doing what we were doing. And it's taken, I wouldn't say a long time, but it's taken a number of challenging years. But now everything has shifted, and people want their electric airplanes now all of a sudden. We have a backlog of orders, over 700 of our airplanes that people want, and we're still in the process of certifying, getting FAA certification for our first one, the two-seater. And so that's a little bit of bragging, but it's also been phenomenal to watch this industry now embrace this possibility. And everyone asks, well, will there be electric commercial airliners like what Lauren flies? And, of course that's coming. It's just going to take a while for this technology to develop and mature. But it's just been so great. And that's kind of who I am as a person. I like to sort of shake it up. And that's why I love getting involved in companies like this, is because somebody said you're crazy and you're never going to do it. And that's just been more motivation for all of us to keep at it?
Well, I would say with the industry, there are more women coming in week by week, year by year. However, the climate of the field is still male, highly male dominated. And there are women that are chief pilots, but for the most part, our VPs, our entire union, all of our representatives are all male. And I think one of the reasons for that is because women are still wearing all the hats and playing all the jobs. We go and we fly for a 4-day trip. We come home, we're cooking, we're taking care of kids, taking care of the household. And so we just don't have time to be able to take on those leadership roles. And so I think making maternity leave at a higher pay, or making sure that those roles are paid well so that I can hire a housekeeper, or I can hire a cooking service to be delivered to my door, so I can put that time towards having a more leadership role. So I think it's finding fair wages and also making sure that there are rules around our work rules around our jobs, so that we can set a fair playing field between men and women.
I like that. That's a really good point, Lauren. And some, really great insights from all of you. My last question, and then I'm going to open it up. We'll have a few minutes for questions. And Jade has asked some great questions in the chat. And so thank you for, for Vanessa and Diane for answering those. But what was one of the most fun projects or trips or things that you've worked on, in your role? Because you all have some really great, cool roles and you're doing some really great things. So like Lauren, what was one of your favorite like flights that you did, or like a cool, quick story? Or Vanessa, you're working with NASA, and Rachel, there's so much going on at the airport. And Diane, even just what you're creating is a really cool project. So Lauren, we'll start with you and we'll go on.
I would say that this year, or actually last year, is when I got on the 757, 767, which technically the 76 is a wide body aircraft, which is something that I've worked since 2001 for 20 years to work towards. So flying that aircraft, not just in the simulator for 7 weeks, but the very first time having hands on that airplane with tons of, 289 people in the back flying to Tokyo, was such a self-actualization, such an empowering experience that I had, that made these last 20 years of hard work completely worth it. And just in closing, making sure that every opportunity that I have, especially at the level where I can interact with passengers and with kids that are aspiring aviators, it's making those milestones like that trip has continued my passion. And I'm looking to instill that into all those that I come in contact with who are interested in the field.
For me, so the current job that I have, the current role, is amazing. It's killing me to not be able down to Johnson Space Center and see the lunar lander mock-up that my team built. So I think that's going to be a highlight for sure of my career. Before then, I had the opportunity, and this is dating me, but to redesign the launch pad that the shuttle used to launch on. And while shuttle was still flying, and so being able to climb all the way to the top of the launch pad where the lightning rod is, it was a sunny day. It was not it was not cloudy at all, but to be able to have the chance to be where these amazing machines are flying, have two different shuttles on pad 39A and 39B at Kennedy Space Center, and be able to experience firsthand the amazing hardware that takes our astronauts into space. It's one of the coolest things I have ever done.
So every year there's an aviation event in Hollywood at the Beverly Hilton called the Living Legends of Aviation. And a couple of times Aerospace has purchased a table, and I've gotten to go a couple of times. And I have to go back and say, this is such a great industry because there are movie stars there who are aviators, and they all go and they all show up and everybody speaks the same language. And so here is John Travolta and Treat Williams and Harrison Ford and Kenny G. They're all pilots, and they show up to support actually teaching young children about potential careers in aviation is the purpose of the evening. It's called the Kitty Hawk Academy. And everybody's dressed up in their Hollywood finest, but you're getting to rub shoulders with the Hollywood types, and it's aviation and aerospace that's really the common ground here. And I just don't know how many industries where you see that. And so have gotten to meet those folks, and they're just the nicest people again. And they love, love, love flying. And that's the common thing that everyone shares. It's just so cool.
So there are a lot of policy issues that I'm working on right now that I'm really excited about and hope to see come to fruition. But there are also just these little moments of working, kind of piggybacking off of what Diane said, of working in aviation, that you show up every day to your job, and it's just a really cool job working in aerospace and aviation. At the beginning of COVID last year, I was able to go out. The airport was at traffic was down about 97% over 2019. And we had a handful of runways that were shut down. We had a bunch of United Airlines planes that had been sort of wrapped up, parked permanently being for a year on our runways, and getting to just lay down on a runway that would normally be operational at one of the, the fifth busiest airport in the country, and get to lay on that runway and watch planes take off from another runway. Those are the types of things that, while it's not a project I worked on, just really geeky, exciting, cool stuff that you get to do when you are in this space.
So cool. I love that. I mean, I love all this. This is so cool and so fascinating. Does anyone have any questions? You are welcome to take yourself off mute or put it in the chat. We have a few minutes.
I have a question, but I understand I've been asking all the questions, so I want to give everybody else some time. No, just me. Okay. Obviously, being who you are, representation is important, but I was wondering if there was anything that all of us could do to help the women leadership pipeline. I know Vanessa said that at one point, one of her mentors was like, you need to go do this. And it was an amazing opportunity. And I've kind of had the same experience of not really knowing what's the next step and having someone just be like, go do this. You'll love it. It'll be great. And the experience was like amazingly wonderful. Or is there anything that our own businesses can do to help incentivize this women in leadership pipeline, so we're not having to be the only ones in the room?
I would say something that any industry can do is you have stretch assignments that you can devise in different roles and just give a taste to a person, to another person that you are either trying to push to grow, or that you are wanting to strengthen their confidence. And those small victories, I would say, will build that confidence really quickly. And it doesn't have to be a jump in a role. It can be different small stretch assignments that will either build them in their business savvy, or these other skill sets that are necessary for them to get to the leadership in your specific company. And again, I think that applies to everybody, and will allow them to feel just more, to put themselves a little bit more out there. I have heard in so many recent meetings, so much that it makes me think about it, that women want to, when they look at a role, they look at all the different criteria for the role. You're shaking your head because it comes up. It's
I
like,
was gonna say this exact same thing, so keep going, Vanessa.
oh no, so it's like judging ourselves against this perfection. If there's one or two things that I can't do or haven't done, it's we shoot ourselves down, where our counterparts, they're like, half good enough, let's go for it, I'm great. And go and do it. And I see Mike smiling too. And
that's true in every industry. So
anyway,
Absolutely.
Rachel, yeah.
I saw a tweet last year that said, ladies, Kanye West thinks he's qualified to be president. Apply for all the jobs. And I think, to echo everything you said, I think as much as we can support the women coming up behind us, the women who are our peers, I think oftentimes we as women, to your point, look at, I meet 9 out of the 10 criteria, I guess I shouldn't apply. But if another woman or, a colleague comes and says, Vanessa, you would be amazing at this role. And I know you only meet 5 of the 10 criteria, but let me write you a letter of recommendation, or I'm going to back you, or I think you would be great at this. Sometimes that's just the little push that I think we need to be able to, my job at the airport, but for having a male counterpart say, why are you not applying for this job? I wouldn't have applied for it because I didn't have a background in aviation or aerospace. And he said, none of that matters. You know how to approach problems in the way that we need, apply for it. And I think the more that we can do that, the more we can support women in them.
I love that. I know we're coming up on time. Chantel has a great question, so I'd love for you to ask that.
Oh, yeah, I was just curious. I mean, I work in law and politics. I do what Rachel does, but in the healthcare space. And, I'm an extrovert. I'm an ultra networker, and I love it, and it's in my nature. But my daughter, who just did her first solo and is quickly on her way to a career in aviation, does not have a similar propensity to put herself out there. And so mentors we've talked to have said, you got to hustle, you got to get known, you got to get out there. And that immediately scared her because that's just not her nature. So I just wonder, how important it is for somebody who, like you, Lauren, I mean, I was messaging with you because the career path you have is her dream, right? To be an international pilot. But, sometimes she's like, maybe I should just be a cargo pilot so I don't have to talk to anybody. So, how important is building a network in aviation? And how do you learn those skills? Like, how do you teach them? Because trust me, I'm trying.
I mean, I would say, as I mentioned before, I went and did interview training, and there are certain places that you could attend classes to have her be able to hone those skills of what maybe doesn't inherently come naturally to her. I wouldn't say it's very different than any other industry where it's solely based on networking. I think it would behoove her to go to any conferences that are available once they're back up and running. But say, for instance, Women in Aviation that I went to in Dallas, some of the keynote speakers there were from Delta and United Airlines. And I happened to recognize on one of the employee buses in Denver, the hiring manager for United Airlines. I gave him my card. Next week, I had an interview. I had already had the job at Delta, but it's that sort of interaction, again, where you have to capitalize on the opportunities that you do have, but it's not such a, networking industry where it's as important. I mean, your resume, if you don't have the time on your resume, you won't even get looked at. But I do think that any connections that you do have that are recommendations that can, for the airlines, will push you to the top of the stack. So it's not the most important, but having the social connection and communication would definitely give her a little bit better start.
this is Magnolia, and I'm not part of the panel, so I should not be answering this question. But I know Chantel. She and I worked in Snell and Wilmer back in the days, and we're good friends. I know Diane. Diane and I are very good friends with her husband. That's why I'm here, because I saw her name. But I was just gonna piggyback on what Lauren said about women in aviation, because I'm a member of the Women in Aviation chapter, Mile High chapter here in Denver. It's a great networking community. A lot of soft-spoken, very introverted individuals that I met there. Some of them pilots, some of them pilot instructors, whatnot. I'm not a pilot. I want to be a pilot. I'm still trying to get my private pilot's license. I've been a student pilot for a long time now. So my passion is aviation. But I have all of the hours. I have 120 hours already. But it's really a great networking event. And I think that within that circle, if your daughter Chantel is a little bit more on the introvert side, she will meet a lot of people like her there, and she will enjoy them.
Well, I am proud to say she just got a scholarship from the Mile High chapter of Women in Aviation for her PPL. So she will now be plugged in.
Oh, God, good. That's great.
So thank you. Thank you. Great.
Awesome. I know we are over. Thank you so much for, adding that, Magnolia. And thank you so much for staying a few more minutes over. Thank you so much to our speakers. You're so amazing. And as I forewarned everybody earlier, we just scratched the surface with them. And thank you, for sharing your insights, your experience, and teaching us a few things. And thank you to our attendees today as well. So enjoy the rest of your day, and good luck this weekend with whatever happens with the weather. So thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.